there are certain variables that depend essentially like on the environment. So what does that mean? Uh, when we have like a Flask application, like we might have, we have like a database. This is outside of the code base. You may need to store something like the API keys, right? That again is generally you try to store that outside of the code base. So why would something like that be stored outside of the code base? Let's say, we're building this like Foursquare application that's really good at like pulling down Foursquare data, telling us different information about our like various venues and things like that, right? It's great at kind of scraping the data. Or let's say, for instance, like that Career Scraper, right? Like I built an application for that. And I want to allow the world to have access to it, okay? What I don't necessarily want is I don't want them accessing and messing with my personal database. Like I'm happy for them to set this up on their own database, but I don't want them, working with my database to do it. Another thing, maybe we'll do the whiteboard, right? So I don't want them, we have this application, right, that does various things, like my Career Scraper, or let's just stick with Foursquare. And I'm happy to let you guys, use it. But the database part, like you should set up your own database, okay? And I don't, maybe you'll mess with my database. You can, if I give you access to my database, then obviously, you could like delete all my records. It's not a good move. The other thing is when like accessing the API, I don't want to give you like my API keys because again, like maybe there's some cost associated with it when maybe you start doing something outside of the rules of Foursquare and like then they get mad at me. So like these types of things, I'm happy to give you the code base, but like these types of things I want to keep separate. So that's kind of one reason for not sharing, for like having these separate things for environmental variables, right? Is one just like security, I guess. Another reason is simply, when you're developing, okay, in development, like by that I mean there's really like two phases for right now you can think of a project. One is development of the project, and two is production. So what do we mean by that? When we're just coding our Foursquare application or we're coding, the Career Scraper, before we, or any website or any technology, before we're ready to make it live and before we're ready to make like a feature live, right? That is in development. And generally we work with, sample data, not real data, right? Or we work with like not data the customer or / stakeholder will directly access. Why? Why do we work with like not the real data or not, not data this customer will use? Because we could mess it up, right? Like, and this is our copy. Like for, just to make like a very stark example, my main software development role was in an application that managed data on like social workers. And not only social workers, but the kids that they took care of, the judges making that had to, preside over the various cases, the whole system, right? So like we were literally the database of record for the state of like Montana and California. So we messed up any of that data. We didn't want to go near, like no developer wants to go near any of that data, right? Because we don't want it to be our responsibility. We want to make sure that data is handled very, very carefully and that we're able to kind of have a sandbox, like this development environment that obviously is not going to mess up any of the data. Even when it's like less dire than that, lots of times it really is, if you think about Facebook or credit cards, any of that stuff, you don't want to be working with production data. When you want to be quite careful about it. And generally you have like a DevOps team and there's a lot of procedure around it, things like that. So when you work with any feature, right, you're using a development database. And then, say we're in development This is basically what we'll do. This is, by development, I mean like on our laptop, right? So here will be the code, and we'll have Foursquare, and this will be, and I don't like this, I wish I had an eraser for this. Okay, so this is generally like the procedure, is you'll have development, so this is dev, this is, let's say, production, okay? So when I say development, I mean like on our laptop. And we're coding, we push to GitHub, we access the development database. When our feature is good, all the tests pass, the project manager signs off on it, we then can push to production. Basically just through GitHub. It's the same procedure as through GitHub. Maybe there's, but it essentially works that way, okay? And then our code now will interact. We want our code now to interact with the production environment, okay? And we want that to be pretty seamless, all right? Like we want to be able to do this. This is called continuous integration. The idea of continuous integration is that it shouldn't be so difficult. There should not be a lot of friction between development and production. It should be pretty easy to make a change, run all the tests, have like a product manager sign off on it, and then your code is in production, right? So if you think about it, what would be pretty bad about this is if every time I push to development, I then have to look through my code, change all the environmental variables, this stuff about like the database, or things like that, to the production database, right? Like every time I go through it, I don't want to have to go around and look at, oh yeah, right, now that we're in production, we're actually using this type of stuff. So the idea is, let's store all of the production, all the development. What we'll do instead is we'll just have a document that basically has my environmental variables. And this will be like the .m file. And the .m file will now have db equal to like development db, or whatever it is. And that's what we'll use in development. And then in production, we'll have a different .m file, and that will be db equals production db, okay? And so when we kind of do something like in a different file, we do scicop g2.connect, we'll do connect to db, right? db name equals db. And depending on depending on the value in this .m file, this db variable will equal development or it will equal production. And we only have to change this file to swap out the necessary environmental variables. Okay? So this is the idea. The idea is we want to be able to like change our environment, right? To go from development to production, or to like have this work on my computer, but I'm not sharing my database with other people, right? So what we do is we store the environmental variables in one file, and we reference them throughout our code base. And this way, when we need to change our environmental variables from development to production ones, we simply change this one file. We don't go searching throughout a million lines of code to find all of our environmental variables. Yeah, you guys get the problem? Okay, cool. So now how do we do something like that? So we'll use this. Here's the web app. And one way to do this before the .m file is you simply would store the environmental variables in your terminal, okay? So this terminal, your terminal holds on to this environment, okay? And you can see that we just have these like key value pairs. These are literally variables, term session equals. And you can access any of this data by saying, echo means just to like display. And you can say $, let's say iTerm profile, right? And it returns default because it's simply key equals value. And then we can add new ones, by doing like export, let's say like database equals development. So this export is how we're going to set a variable. And then we can access it by doing, echo $database. Okay. One issue with this is once you restart, if you do export, it's very temporary this way. So if I create a new tab and now I look for that environmental variable, it's nowhere to be found. In this tab it works. So I can do echo database here and that worked fine. But if I move over to here, it's gone. Right, there's nothing there. Got it? Here it works, here it doesn't. And once we shut down the terminal, it's gone. So what do you do to fix this? You can reference this, let's go to this directory. So you see this .bash profile, Z profile. These are all files that start when you open your terminal. Okay, they will be run when you open your terminal or when you start a new tab. And if you look at this thing, code.bash profile, you can see that it already remember that export command to set a variable? Here we are setting the path. So if you wanted to hold on to an environmental variable like database equals development, right? This is one way to do it. So we'll save this. Let's do exit. And now if you look for it here, it won't be there because this thing only gets the .bash profile is only run when you start a new session. So we can press tab, and now if we look for it, it should be somewhere there. Let's see if I do echo $database. I hope it works. It doesn't work. It's a bummer. Yeah, I don't know. I might have to think about that some more. But that's the idea. I'll try to figure out why that didn't work. All right, so this would be one way to store it in theory if this worked. Even if we could do it this way, we would not want to. All right, why would we not want to do store our database information here? Because it's available throughout the entire system, right? It's available throughout my entire computer, and I'm going to have many different projects we're working on on my computer, and it doesn't make sense to go to this directory when really what we're working in is sorry about that, is way over in this other directory where we have, which one is it? It's the Flask models reading. Cool. All right, we want to store environmental variables here. That's where our code is. Okay. So the way that you do that is you work with this .m file, and that comes from a package, right, called python.env. And it's pretty simple. So you can see we can install it here. Really, the way we should do is put in requirements.txt, but we'll just run this to start. Defaulting to normal requirement already satisfied. So I already have it on my computer. And then let's see what the documentation says. So, okay, you can add a python.m to your application to make it load the configuration from a .m file, right? So you can see this is how .m files should be written. Key, make this bigger, key equals value, right? And you can see you can even reference variables here, okay? So what will we do? We will create a .m file, and now access the code, and we'll put, you can see, let's just look at what we originally had. I think originally we had this nhl.db, so let's just do that for now. Let's say db equals nhl.db. It's just a value. I think this is probably fine. We'll find out. So that's the first step, is you create a .m file and you just store the key equals value like it tells us to right here. The next thing to do is now to load this. So it says to make it load the configuration from a .m file, we do the following. So we're going to do this in a settings.py. All right. So just do touch settings.py, And now in our settings.py, we're going to reference the .m file to now call load.env, and that will essentially set everything here as an environmental variable. And we can see this. The other thing we generally do is, in order to access our environmental variables, we import OS. This is a standard Python library, so we don't need to do pip install for this. And OS just stands for operating system. So it allows you to perform commands that you would perform on your operating system. And for us, what does that mean? It means accessing the environmental variable. Okay, it means accessing, an environmental variable from here. Okay, so let's see that. So do os dot, I think it's getenv, or is it just os dot? I'm going to make sure. Os get environmental variable, Python. Getenv, yeah. Okay, so we can do os.getenv, and you can do this for any environmental variable. For example, if I did os.getenv term, right, this is just allowing Python to access this environmental variable. It should print out x term. So let's just print this out. Actually, we'll set this equal to a variable, and we'll just print this out. And we don't need anything about .m. This is just standard Python, right? Use the operating system library to get this environmental variable, then set it equal to this Python variable, and then print it out. So let's see if that works. So we'll do Python 3 settings.py. You see that? This comes from we printed this out because that's what the term was equal to, wherever it is. I can't see it, but it's there somewhere. There it is. All right, so because we have .m, though, we can now access everything in the .m file. Python will act as if this is also an environmental variable. So we'll just use the same kind of thing. So we'll call this db, and we'll do os.getenv, and I think, oopsies, getenv, and this is db. Right? This variable should equal NHL. All right, and let's print that out and just see what it equals. So run this, and there it is, .nhl_db. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to now make this available in our application. Okay? So let me show you kind of how this works. Give me 1 second. So we have this, so we're just gonna create a little Flask app in the Python console. So import Flask, and they'll say app equals Flask dunder name. So this is my application. This application has a config object. All right, and this is used for storing information that is useful throughout, configuration essentially about your application. So for instance, the maximum cookie size is the maximum amount of data you're allowed to store on somebody's browser. The session lifetime, when you log in, how long do we allow that session to be valid for? The application root, when they go to home, it should be, that should come from /, right? It's general information about your web application. The way that this thing works is you can see it, right? This is technically an object, but it's designed to operate just like a dictionary, okay? So if you want to access any of this data, you can just do app.config and then just specify the key that you want here. So I'm going to do app.config, treat it like a dictionary, and do testing, and that returns false. Okay, so this is us retrieving any information we want. If you want to add information, you do app.config.update, right? And we can put whatever we want. So I think it's whatever equals foo. And now let's look at it, app.config. There it is. There's my key value pair. We did it by using the update command, right? And now we can access it, update config, square bracket, whatever, and that gives us back foo. So how are we going to use this? We're going to store a database on our application, okay? So from at Flask, and you can see I'm kind of doing it here, but we'll just do it more directly. So we'll set a key of database, or DB, yeah, we'll call it database, equal to from settings import DB, right? Because this settings file has this DB, so we're just going to import it, and now we'll put that here. All right, and then so now that we've stored it on our application, we can retrieve it. Just you can see I'm doing it right here by referencing the app, doing .config, and now here we'll pass through lowercase database. All right, and that should work. All right, so this thing is just going to equal. I'll put a breakpoint right here. This thing is going to just return to me the value of this database, which is the value of DB, which comes from here, and this is set over here. So it's just NHL.db. So let's boot this up. And then localhost. Is it 5,000? Okay, that's cool. It says not found, but I know it's hitting, a valid URL. And what we want to get to is /NHL/players. And we're at a breakpoint. That's great. And now what do we want to find out? We just want to find out what is this app.config database. Right? And it is exactly what we want, this NHLDB. So do continue. It seems like things are good and things are good. Okay? So the value of this, if we ever want to switch out our database, all we need to do is change this right here. Okay? So we'll just change this to foobar. This obviously won't work, but we'll refresh. Let's hit our breakpoint. We'll see what this value is now, app.config.database. And it broke, I lied. We probably have to exit this out for environmental variables. Let's do this one more time. We'll refresh, hit our breakpoint, app.config. You see that? And there it is, foobar. All right, so that's how easy it is for me to change my environmental variables. What makes this even easier is lots of times you simply won't, when you push your code, you just simply won't include your .m file, okay? And the way that you do that is pretty easy. You just have a .getignore file. And the only thing that's difficult, let's see if this works. And you just put the name of the file you don't want to include, .env. All right? So now let's take a look at this. Git status. We add the .getignore. And yeah, it doesn't even list. This is fun, right? It doesn't even list .env as a possibility. Let's see that one more time. If I put settings.py, hopefully it will now not do that. See that? Settings.py is now gone. Right? So if you don't want to include files, generally these are ones that's like your .m file that store information you don't want to share. You just put it, simply list it in your getignore file. So it's very easy to do this. And it automatically won't show up. So that's what you'll do. You just simply won't share your .m file, and you'll put in the README, hey, add these values, blah blah, and the user will have to do it. Cool. So that's the main thing I wanted to show. Questions about this material so far, right? So the workflow is, add the .m file, set the key value, then import by doing this os.getenv, right, and specify the key you want to access that will retrieve for me the value. And then we can set this on our config object, right? By setting, we get to set kind of any values we want here, and then we can access that value. So we're setting database equal to DB, which is NHL.db, and here we're accessing this database key, which is NHL.db. Yeah, Mike.
I had a question. What's the value at setting the app.config rather than passing through the DB value itself?
Great question. Okay, so Mike's question, right, is like, hey, this seems, I don't really get, why don't we just do this? This seems easier, right? Just access it directly from settings.py. Why am I doing this? Okay, so the reason why is because we want to use this like in development, meaning like when we boot up, we want to use the nhl.db. This will make more sense when we get to like testing databases, which we'll talk about soon. But in development, right, we want some data in our database so that we can like work on it and, sorry, let me press continue here, and like see that things are working fine. In testing, the procedure is to start with a blank database. Why do you do that? So that you can see before and after. For example, let's say we're writing a function that deletes data, right? That deletes a record. Well, like if we're running the test and we're trying to do this on development and we're like, okay, find the guy with index 0 or whose name is Connor Bunneman and then delete him. If we run that test twice, the first time it will work, it will delete him. The second time the test will break, even though our code is working fine. So with testing, while with development, right, like doing something like this, we want some sample data in there. With testing, we're always testing like before and after. So what that means is we want a way to like switch out pretty easily what this database is. And what we'll do is we'll like have, you know, a file called like test, you know, application.py. And in there, you'll access the app and you'll just do app.config, you know, set.update the database, and this will equal your test DB, something like that, right? So this is a way to and now when you access it over here and you run your test, so when you run it from here, at this point, it's going to be set. You know, we'll do this somewhere else, and this will be set from here, and therefore you'll be accessing the test DB, right? So you'll move this part to like a, you know, the I forget what we called it, the manage.py file or something like that. Okay. Yeah, that will make more. If that was confusing to some of you, that will make more sense when we move through the testing material. Serge.
So sometimes we need to information when you're connecting to the database. For example, in Postgres, we need the database and the username.
Yeah.
So how would we do that here?
Yeah, you just put like username equals, you know, Serge, and then, you know, password, same thing, right? Yeah, and then you'll just access it from your settings.
Do you just do commas then?
No, there's no commas here, right? Generally, so yeah, a couple of points. Generally with the environmental variables, and you can see this is how they use it here as well. There's no spaces, all right, between the key and the value, right? So just like in terms of stylistically, there's no spaces. Everything touches, right? And there's no commas. The commas actually will break it. So you just list it line by line. And then this part is just normal Python. We're just, you know, set equal to this, set this equal to that.
I'm sorry, in the application.py, could you please go to the application.py?
Sure.
Yeah, so when you're doing
okay, so say we're doing Postgres. So this is like, let's do this. So we'll do like import scicop g2, and then it'll be connection equals scicop g2.connect, and then, so this is, okay, so a lot of you guys were running, this is how we want to be setting the data, right? Like this format. So you'll do scicop g2 connect, and now you'll do database is, you know, app.config database, right? And you'll just do that here. and then user is app.config user. Like we'll set that, and then app password is app.config password. Okay, cool. One thing to point out, I saw a number of people run into this. It is confusing. If you look at the connect function in Postgres, can I get to it? Let's see. I should be able to by clicking on this. Okay, so I'm holding this down. You see this? This is like confusing. So what a lot of you guys have done is just pass the name of the database as a string. But if you pass a string, Scicap G2 expects you to be using this format, where inside the string you have key equals value, db name equals test. Why they did that, I don't know, but that's what they did. So if you just pass a string, it's gonna like throw some sort of error. I forget what it's called exactly, but the reason why is because it's expecting you, when you pass a string, to use this format, right? So if you're just like, here's the name, connect, it'll throw an error because it expects you to be like inside the string, db name equals the database name, all right? So instead what I do is I just use, this feels way more like Python, like normal Python to me, just use the keyword argument for each one. Cool. And look, just also notice like how useful, like holding down command and hovering over the, this is. This is what you want to do. You want to have an easy way to like navigate a code base, work with the tools, and like figure things out. So, try to get in the habit of, I'm just pressing command and then I'm hovering over, or I could, click on this, and it also is giving me this. Give me the documentation. And I just exit out of it when I'm done. Yeah, Nikhil?
So this is more of a question about just best practices. I guess specifically when we're like creating cursors and connections to databases, like I've like heard that, sometimes you can run into like limits in terms of like, I don't know, like 16 connections per cursor or something, especially when you're like creating a bunch of like requests to a database or a table or something, right? Like, is there a best practice in terms of like we create a connection, we create a cursor, like are we supposed to like shut it down or something after every request or something like that?
I think it will. I haven't run into that error. I think that you can do like connection.close, like it, I think you can run into that with testing sometimes, like more with like when you're committing data, meaning like you're changing the database, right? Like when you're adding or deleting data. As data engineers, we don't really do that too much. We just kind of query data. And so like I haven't had to close connections for that. What I will do is you'll notice I'm connecting to the database right inside each method. I think you have to do that. It also like, I think also it's probably just a good idea. So if you break on one request, it doesn't correspond to the other one. So that's normally what I'll do, and we will like break this out into a method, right, called like getDB or something like that.
Okay, and that's typically more done, or I guess like the closing part is more done when we were perhaps like inserting large amounts of data.
So like for instance, like the time that you would see that is say with testing, where again, like where you start with a blank database, we add a couple records, then we're like, okay, let's find the user that has been here the longest or signed up or is the oldest or whatever, right? So for that, that's where I'll do like, okay, commit and like close, something like that. Lots of times. Yeah. You may want to look at, that is something like, maybe you do want to look at Postgres' documentation. It can vary based on the database, and they might have some info about it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. So this is, that's like kind of this configuration portion. There is one other thing we should talk about, which is confusing, right? That's like this packages stuff. And more like I think the circular reference, we can talk about that. Hopefully I can do it. Say we have a player and then we have a team, okay? And what's pretty common and what we will do is we'll say like, okay, well, a player has a team, right? And what we'll want to do is like, eventually, is like return an instance of a team, right? And maybe we'll pass through like the team name equals like the player's team name, right? If they, I guess we don't have it here, but maybe we'll, I don't know. Let's just pretend. For right now, everybody plays for the Flyers. They can use it. All right, so you can see all of a sudden we have this issue where, like, this is not referenced, right? This doesn't exist in this file anywhere. So what we need to do is, and let's create a new folder called models. We might as well. And we'll move team into models, and we'll move player into models. Okay? And, all right, so we have a player. A player belongs to a team, and then a team is going to have many players. Class team, def init, self. I guess we don't even need something like that. I'll just do that. We'll have a name equals self.name equals name. And then we'll do def players, right? And the way this will work is, we'll kind of, I guess we'll have to just like go through all the players and it will return each of them. So for player in some sort of list of players, let's just give it like some names like Travis and Sam and Pam, right? And then we'll pass through the name. Okay, and then we'll return this. And let's just break this out into a different, right? Okay, so these are my names. So now what do we need to do? Well, this isn't referenced, right? So what we need to do is, right, this isn't kind of in the file or in the module. So we have to say from player, import player. Okay, and now it seems to be okay. And now in my player class, we need to clean this up. So I'll say, okay, get this from the team module, from team, import team. Okay, and then let's create a console. And we can say, for now, we can just say like, we'll just do this. We'll say, from models.player, import player, from models.team, import team. And I think this will cause a circular import error. Let's find out. So we'll do now Python 3-i console.py and no module name team. Okay, so we're getting something else. Let's see if we can figure this out. So we're in console.py, right? That's how we're kicking off our code. And then here we're saying from team import team. And the error we're getting is, in player.py line 1, so that's right here, from team import team, and it says no module name team. So why is that happening? Remember that even though we can see this relative to the current file, that's not what Python's looking at. It's looking at relative to the file you kicked off the code from, right? So we're running the code by doing Python 3 console.py. We need to be relative to the console.py file. In other words, if you just type ls and you can't see the word, if you can't see the word inside this file, like you can't see team, it doesn't see it here either. Like Python also doesn't see it because it's taking the perspective of console.py. So we need to say from models, right? Because it goes to models, team.py, models, player.py. So from models.team, import team. From models.player, import player. Okay, so just to go through that again, what we got when we ran Python 3-i console.py, let me just move this back. Originally I had this from player, import player. This is going to break, right? Why? Because Python's taking the perspective of the file that is kicking off, right? That is kicking off, like running your code. And in this case, that's the console.py file, right? That's the one that we're running. And from console.py's perspective, there is no player module, We have to take its perspective. What there is a ls models. There's a models dot player path. Okay, so we'll do from models dot player, and that should work. And now let's do console.py, and now we got our circular import. Okay, so this is now a new error, right? It looks different. So what does it say? It says cannot import name player from partially initialized module models.player, most likely due to a circular import, right? And now we go to, I think we're in player.py, but really we can see, right, this is the car crash, but this is what leads up to the car crash, right? So here's what leads up to the car crash. File console.py line 1. Let's go there. So that here we are. It says models.player import player. What's next? Models player.py line 1. So it says to import, to go to the player, right? Load this thing. So then it's going to go to player.py line 1, and this says load the team. What does team say? Team says to import player. So basically, right, we go to player, it says go to team, then we go to team, it says go to player, then we go to player, right? It just goes back and forth, ping pongs. That's the circular import error. So how do you fix this? The way that you can do it is, let's see if we can do it this way. We'll say import models as models, okay, here. And then we'll do the same thing, stop that, over in team.py. Import players, no, import player as, no, import models as models, sorry. So we're not even typing the word player or team, up top here. But instead what we'll do is we'll say models.player, right? So I'm gonna get this player object from my models package. And that now I think we'll have to add in a init file, but let's see if we don't. So here we'll do import models as models, and we're gonna get this team from here. So we're not saying the word go to team, go to player anymore. We're saying just stay here, just go back here. And that should solve the issue. So let's see if this works. Oh, look at that, sweet. Okay, so now if I create a new team, let's create a new team, call players. So team equals the flyers, and I'll do flyers dot players. Does that work? Players take 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. So that seems to work fine. I just initialized this wrong. Oh, it takes, I think I'll have to pass through like all that stuff. But you get the point. This players take 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. I'm sorry. That's not right. What's the error here? Do you guys know? So this is at the method level, right? It can't even call the method. So take 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. When you see this in the class, right, what's the one argument that's given? Sonia, you got it? Yeah, it's.
No, I was gonna say that you didn't capitalize it. That I don't think that's right. But I don't think that's gonna solve it.
Yeah, this is an issue with self, right? So that's what needs to be provided.
There you go.
Cool. All right, let's try this. We'll see if we get any further. So we create a team. We do flyers.players. Okay, and now cool. I thought this might happen. So now we're at the next error. Models has no attribute player. This is because you really only get this with a package. And the way that we create a package, this is just a folder. I don't even know what you call this. I guess just a folder right now. We can turn it into a package by putting the dunder init.py. Okay, and now what we can say is from the .player class. I think we can do it this way. Import player, and now from team import team. Okay, what this will do, let me show you this maybe another way. I think I can just do this. I'm in, what folder I'm in? Yeah, so I'm in models. So I'm just gonna open up the console. And I can do import models. And you can also do like, now we can do something like import models as models. And now you get to do models dot player, right? Why do you get this? Because this is making these two variables accessible at the package level. This init kind of like stands for this folder, this package, and it's defining, here we're defining what's available at this level. We could probably do this for other things. Like if I do foo equals bar, now let's just exit out of here. You can access models dot foo, all right? But in this case, what we're doing is we're accessing the player class and the team class that we're getting from these files. And once we have access to class, we basically have access to like creating an instance of that class, etc. So what we can do now is we added this init, right? Which allowed models to have an attribute of like player and team. And then in the player class, now we're able to call models.team, okay? And in the teams class, now we're able to call model.player. This, we'll get an error here because, we're gonna have to provide like I guess we can provide this all here, I guess. Let's just set these things. Age is 28, height is 6'1", weight is 1, that's a little low, shot is left, birthplace is Ontario, birthday is 8/17, 95, number is 12. So we'll give everybody the same thing, and we'll just we'll give them the same ID too. We'll just give them a different name. So we go through each one. We'll hard code this data, and for every name in the list of names, we'll set them to a different name from here. All right, let's see if that works. So in my console, I have player and team. We want to load up team. This will be the Flyers. We'll create a new team, Flyers, and now I'll do Flyers dot players, right? And that will give me hopefully this list of players. I am returning it, yeah. All right, and now here you get those three objects, and here the whole point is we avoided our circular import, right? Because we're doing import models as models. We're not referencing that word player, right, which gave us that like ping pong back and forth because this was saying teams, and instead we're only getting player by doing models.player. And what allows us to do models.player is the fact that we are making this variable accessible on the package level through this init file. Okay, this dot player confusingly is with the relative path. I don't know, maybe I could do it like this, just to be consistent. Let's see if that works. Yeah, that seems to have worked. Yeah, so that also works. So you can do it from that same kind of starting at the console's perspective, keep going on. Yeah, Jeff, did you have a question?
In the import statement where it says import model as models, I guess I don't understand why it has to be like that. Or what does that mean, I guess?
Yeah, maybe, okay, good question. You may not need it to do this, this as models, but what this means is reference this variable, models, right? This is the models package, as this word. So yeah, maybe we could just do import models, and maybe that works fine. We can try that. Python 3-i, create flyers, flyers that play, it works fine. Right, there was really no, I thought for whatever reason I wouldn't be able to see this word, but you can. But this would allow you to do like import models as foo, right? It's just allowing you to reference the variable as whatever, and then I can do foo.team, right? So normally you'll see, when you'll see like import pandas, this is very typical, as PD. Instead of writing out pandas, you just reference it as PD in your code. Yeah, Serge?
Yeah, this is kind of relevant, but so if you go in the team, so the error that we're getting in the team because of the team.py, where we weren't, sorry, the team.py, where we weren't passing self in players method. So if you would do this as a static method, wouldn't that work? If you like did the static method here on top of
A
the
static
method and you have to pass self in it.
Oh, you're saying like a method not inside team? Or what do you mean?
No, sorry, like you keep that, but you remove self and then you write on top, right above
property.
def players, and you write static method.
Oh, maybe. I actually haven't worked with static methods. Bound to a class. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that though. This is kind of like, this feels like this is related to. I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah, maybe you can do this, Serge. Let's not get into it though.
Yeah, that was relevant.
But it is, it's fair for you guys to look at. Feel free to take a look at this. But yeah, I just don't want to confuse people. Cool. Other questions? Okay. Yeah. So that was really like the material that that you all went through.